faces from last week. Hands up if you weren't here last week. Welcome. Great to be here with you guys. My name's Taryn. I have a long history and career in sales and sales leadership, predominantly in telecommunications. In the last 5 years, I've been working with tech startups and tech industry businesses to develop sales teams to become world-class and to embody world-class success-based mindsets. Victoria has asked me to come here and give you a series of talks about key components of the sales process. Last week, we spoke about cold calling and the mindset that's important for that. And everything that I do, there is always the underpinning of mindset being a key component in the success that we encounter. But today, we're going to be talking about, I've been asked to come and talk to you about the sales cycle and more explicitly, the how to create urgency, because there is a desire to move the business through the pipeline quickly, and even with the best intentions, we still have to be cognizant of the fact that we work to a degree with our customers' timescales. Depending on the size of the organization, that becomes more complicated because they have structures and processes. But when you're working with slightly smaller organizations where maybe you're speaking to the owner, or the significant principal in the business, they actually have the ability to make decisions quite quickly. And it's when we are working with those kinds of companies that urgency becomes more of a hot topic. So let me ask you guys, when's the best time to create urgency? Shout it out. Guys, you better take part in this as well, because if you just sit there and passively absorb it, listen, you're not going to absorb this. If you engage and ask questions, you will fire more synapses, you will fire more neural pathways, and you will retain more. So, when is the best time to try and create urgency? Perfect answer. At the beginning, because at the beginning of the sale, you have every opportunity to understand about that customer or prospect's business. Because urgency isn't something that you apply in the sense of, are you ready to buy? That's pushiness at best and desperation at worst. What we're really looking to do is encourage the customer to see their situation differently. There's some truths about selling that I'm going to share with you. And it relates to this. That if there is no need and there is no problem, there is no sale. There is no problem, there is no motivation to change what they're doing. So if we cannot reveal, uncover, discover a dimension of the business that is impacting them negatively, we are not going to get them to move forward with us. We're not going to get them to invest more attention with us. So the sales cycle becomes the stepping stones to create that sense of urgency. And it really does start with understanding who they are. And if you're sectorizing, if you're verticalizing the types of business that you approach, that makes it easier because the learnings you get from one call, you can apply to the next. The insights that you discover become applicable to those conversations that come after that. And why is that important? Well, if you speak intelligently about not only their problems or the potential problems they may have in their business, but understand the consequences, those impacts of those problems, they start to subconsciously understand that you understand about their business. And when you feel understood, you feel more trusting. And what we're trying to do as salespeople is not only open a dialogue, but create trust. And why is trust important? Well, every sale is about change. Because every sale starts off with a current situation in the customer's business that at some point in time has become uncomfortable or problematic. Do you guys ask, why now? Do you know what I mean? Why are we speaking today? What's changed in your organization? I'm glad to see heads nodding because that's really important. If you're not doing this yet, it's a really, really good way to open the conversation. And it's even better when they speak more than you do in these early stages. Yeah, because the USDRs are responsible for revealing the situation of the business, the current state. I want to get familiar with that language because that's going to create a serious pathway to creating that urgency in the mind of the customer. So what is that current state that has brought them to having this conversation with you? And they say, this has happened. Okay, well, the question is, that's really interesting. Can you tell me more about how that's been affecting the business and maybe for how long? Because we only make change when the situation is uncomfortable to the point where we can't tolerate it anymore. And it might even be just hierarchical. There are other things I need to do in my business, but once I've got those done, this HR dimension, operational dimension will get addressed. Well, our job is not only to reveal or bring to the surface that awareness, but to look further beyond the scope of the conversation you're having and to see if it actually impacts wider and deeper. Because if we accept what our prospects tell us, the conversation is quite two-dimensional and quite short. And if we accept their first answers, it's a short conversation and it doesn't reveal. So what we're looking for is specificity. We want them to be more explicit in describing how it impacts the business. And why is that? If I get you to describe something that's uncomfortable, something that's problematic, it's going to trigger an emotional response in you. Yeah? And this is the thing about decision making, especially in sales. Yeah? We are emotional beings. We make logical decisions. We think we're making logical decisions based on logic alone. But actually what happens is we have some very, very complex subconscious computational processes going on. We call it thin slicing, taking huge amounts of information in the moment from our past experiences, and we conjure this up into a thought subconsciously that gets expressed as an emotion on the body. Yeah, we get a feeling about something, and then our neocortex, that newer part of our brain, then goes emotion translation into logic, because we like to think we're logical in our decision making, but in fact it's a lot to do with our emotion. So we want them to experience the emotion of that pain when you're talking to them so they can make it more real in their awareness. Because if we talk about it abstractly and they're not connecting with it, it doesn't have that same energetic feel, and therefore they have less charge, less urgency, less agency to do something about it. And if you've only uncovered a small problem, well, it's not going to motivate you to do something. Yeah? I'm going to give you a story. I'll try and recount it as best I can because it was told to me by another salesperson and I thought it was excellent. But it's about perception of the problem. So imagine you're sitting at your desk, yeah, and you're rubbing your temples because you've got this banging headache. It's splitting and you can't really focus. And in an hour's time, in a couple of hours' time, you've got to give a really big presentation and it's worth tens of thousands of euros. Yeah? It's a big deal, and you've got this splitting headache. And all of a sudden, this guy appears in a red jacket. It's me, and I present out my hand, and in my palm of my hand is a box, and in that box is a little white tablet. And I say to you, this tablet is guaranteed to cure whatever is ailing you. How much would you pay for that tablet in that moment? Would you pay 5 euros? Would you pay 100 euros? What about 5,000 euros? Would you pay 5,000 euros for that tablet? How about 50,000? No, probably not, because it's a headache. But what if I then started to ask you questions about your headache? Like, Tell me, how long has this been going on for? Has it been some time? And have you encountered sort of muscle problems and coordination issues when you get this headache sometimes? Or perhaps you've had some problems concentrating and your speech has been slurred. All these things is a resounding yes, and you decide to go and get an MRI scan, and guess what? You've got a brain tumour. Now, would you pay for that tablet at 5,000 euros? You probably would, because the stakes are high enough to make you act. And you'd probably want to do it sooner rather than later because you've got this thing going on in the afternoon. So the point I'm trying to illustrate, and maybe badly, maybe not, is that if you can create an awareness that the pain they have today is more costly to them than acting upon it, then we start to create this sense of urgency. Yeah? So when we talk about that current state, I want you to start asking questions, situational questions of the business. How does that work? Tell me more about that. So tell me how you manage that function of operations, how you manage that function of HR. What do the impacts of those processes have on the business? Does it take longer? I want you to use a combination of open-ended questions where you ask the question and then zip it and then listen. And if they volunteer a shortish kind of non-precise question or response, I want you to say, can you help me understand that a little bit deeper? Can you be a little bit more specific on how that's impacting you? The more they're talking, the more you're getting insight to create this contrast between where they are now and the imaginary future state that they could realize if they employed your software solution to fix that. But the key here is not to start talking about factorial too soon. The key in these early conversations is to listen, to ask questions, to dig deeply. Because SDRs, what you're doing is laying the foundations for the AEs, because their job is to focus the perception of the client on that demonstration call when they're going further into that, how we solve problems for companies like you. Your first conversations, when you have that first 2 minutes, that's kind of selling the meeting. Then I imagine it's having a secondary conversation where you're positioning a little bit more. Maybe it's that first conversation is, let's just speak in a little bit more detail. The second conversation is, right, I actually really want to know, because we work with a lot of companies like you, and what they've told us is that they have this particular problem, and I wanted to hear if you had that same issue, and maybe you could speak to that and how it impacts your business. And then listen. The more they speak, the more you can learn about how your solution impacts upon them. And more importantly, how big the problem is for them. Because if they don't perceive the problem as being significant, there's no motivation to act. There is absolutely no reason for them to change their state. And here's the thing, guys. We humans, because salespeople and buyers, we're all humans, we are DNA coded, we're hardwired to be skeptical of change. Absolutely, it's in our DNA to question and step back from it, because from an evolutionary perspective, change isn't a good thing. It could potentially be something that could cause our demise. So as a buyer, they've got to feel trusted. They've got to feel trust in relationships. So you have to then position yourself as an expert in your field. So the things that you can control in the sales cycle is how well you know your product and how it impacts businesses. Not necessarily the functionality and the widgets and the gadgets and the applications and the whatever, but how it actually impacts businesses and solves problems. And if you haven't done this, for the new people who've joined the team, I'm sure that you're going through this with your respective teams and managers, but create a list of the ways in which your software service, your offering, positively impacts that business. It's really, really important, because we want to speak to those benefits. We really want to speak to how it impacts us. Yeah? So we've got this situation where they've got to change. but there's a case of why do I change? Well, change is really possible when you think the future is better than the now, right? Because if I'm in a situation where I've had this call with you because something fundamentally has made me think, well, you know what? That needs looking at. I want to turn that needs looking at into shit, I need to act. So when we talk about the impact of the problem, the impact is going to resolve to a financial consequence on the business. And if you're struggling to turn that into a monetary consequence, we can look at it from an operational consequence. How does it impact manpower or resources? How does it elongate the time to deliver your service to your clients? What are the net consequences across the team? We're always looking for the consequence that can be measured, because when we can measure something with precision, we can then measure the size of the problem they have. And then the size of the problem relates to the gap between where they are and where they could be. Because what we're selling is essentially change. We're selling this idea of change, yeah? The impact on their business and their need to act in order to realize it. So, how many of you are kind of going down this direction at the moment with the questioning? Hands up. Hands up. Okay. What is it you're encountering when you're using that line of approach? I want to make this a bit more dynamic and interactive now. So give me some feedback.
Just asking the process. Oh, hi. Whoa. Just asking their process at the moment in terms of like how they are kind of like, if I was a employee in your business, how would I be logging a holiday? Like, what's the process of this? And just going deeply into, you know, the frustrating side of things that they're going through every single day, and just kind of talking more on that topic. And exactly what you said, really, just kind of find that pain and keep asking questions deeper and deeper till they start to realize, you know.
Okay, good. And translating that into a consequence to the business. And then you ask the what if questions. What if that didn't happen that way? What if the process was simpler? What if the management of this was streamlined? What would that allow you to accomplish? That's really important, because now we're trying to get them to use a different part of their brain to project into the future in a way that would make the business easier. And there's two dimensions to this, guys. There's the company and the individual. From an individual perspective, if you're talking to someone that is living that problem because they have to manage it, we want them to imagine how it would be if they didn't have to deal with that. What would their day look like? That's really important, because we're trying to get them to connect with this sense of a benefit of the future state. Because the gap between the two, the bigger the gap, the more power you have to create that sense of urgency within them. Now, you know, you can read loads of stuff online, and you can watch videos on YouTube about creating urgency, and you can say, oh, well, it's a time-limited offer, and by the end of the month, we're going to stop doing this. That's not urgency. That's pressure. Yeah? You can use techniques sparingly, carefully, in order to bring about certain outcomes. But you run the risk of having your bluff called, because buyers are pretty savvy these days, and they know that if most of them recognize that you're trying to sell them something, if they wait to the end of the month or the end of the quarter, and even if it rolls into the next month, the chances are the deal will still be on the table. So it's better to position yourself as an expert than a salesperson. You know, I think you really got to stop seeing yourself as someone trying to sell something, and try to see yourself as someone that is able to solve a problem. Talk to the problem, talk to the pain. The pain is really what they're going to focus on. The problem is something that happens, the pain is what they experience, because you experience pain. And that brings us back into that emotional dimension. It's really important. Yeah, please.
Hello, I'm Olivia. I'm an AE on the French market. So I get your point regarding asking good question, and then you got the need. But sometimes my problem is that they recognize they have a need. Sometimes this is not the biggest need or biggest problem they have, and they will be, yes, Olivia, it will be ideal if I work with your solution, but we have other problems. Maybe this one is not the biggest, and making change in my organization take times.
Sure.
So how can I, in that context, I don't know how to create urgency.
If you're talking about a problem or need, that's not the same as pain. Need doesn't elicit a change in behavior. Need can be a low-level experience. We need to question more deeply. Go into the questioning of how does that need affect the business? What is the problem with that approach? Who suffers? Who is affected by it? And keep asking how and why questions, yeah? Because we're trying to get them to look wider, because it's quite often that they look at the situation from a very narrow perspective, because that's what's immediately obvious. But it isn't always the case that what's immediately, it's a bit like an iceberg. You notice what's above the water, but the big body of the problem is below the surface. So we need to keep uncovering. As to the process, well, look, we can't always impact the speed of which it moves through if it's an organization that has complex buying processes. If it's a smaller company, as I say, you can influence their perception by making them realize that the cost of inactivity, which is why I come back to that whole idea of how much financially does that problem translate to for your company? What's the average annual spend for a sweet spot customer? Whatever your ideal number of people is, what's the annual spend? Somebody? If someone said, how much is this likely to cost me for a year for 10 employees? Guys, you salespeople, you should have this in your head. How much? No, a year. I want a year. Guys, do some mental arithmetic and then jot it down so you're familiar with these numbers. It should be congruent with you when you talk about this stuff. So,
we never kind of discuss.
You don't need to, but you should know it. You should know what your solution costs. In 1 year, 10 people.
We don't have the prices for Spain or France. In France, we 6 euro per user. So if you 60, 600, 720.
7,200 a year. Right. Okay. Why is this important to know? Because if you discover that the cost of the problem is 30,000 euros, it's a cheap deal. It's like I'm discounting that money for you. Would you swap 7,000 for 30,000 in return? You'd do that deal every day of the week, wouldn't you? You would, because it makes financial sense. So what I'm trying to get you to see is, if you start changing the way you look at the solution and that you're delivering as a means of discounting cost, rather than it's a software platform. No one cares about your product, guys. No one really cares about Factorial's HR solution, operations solution. What they care about is it fixing a big problem for them, and they don't always know they have a big problem. If you go in with I want to sell you a software package, I don't want a software package. I don't need it. Working as it is. Not perfect, because you haven't impressed upon them the consequences of their current working approach. I think we've got a question in the back first.
Oh, yep. This is Gerard from the Spanish market. We sometimes are facing different problems about, I try to, first of all, know the current situation about the client, okay? Then I try to ask about the problems that they have with this current situation, and then obviously the impact that this method or the situation that they are facing right now, which impact has to the business. Sometimes, or generally, HR is really far from the business, and they don't know about which is currently the impact through these businesses.
Yeah.
How we can just make this urgency to them, because
you're
honestly,
talking to the wrong person. If you're talking about impact of the business to someone that doesn't have the view of the business, then you need to keep talking to more people. HR is a great one if you're talking about HR software, but if you want to talk about the impact on operation,
yeah.
make other members of the team important. Bring them into the conversation.
Yeah, normally they said, okay, this suits for me. This method that you are showing me fix my problem, but I don't know about the business. And honestly, 75%, 80% of the times, they say, okay, this is the CEO who is gonna make the decision.
Yeah, but are you speaking to that person?
Never.
Right, so there's guys, if you're getting the answer that I don't have the view of the wider business, and I'm just going to hand over what you've told me to somebody else to make a decision,
Yeah.
you've lost control of the sale.
Sure. From my experience that I've been working in the HR businesses for the last 7 years, I could speak with the CEOs or the gerencies or whatever, less than 50 times. Why? Because what I thought is like HR, they thought that we are like competences to them. It's like you are gonna make me the competence about I'm doing something wrong. And
Okay.
they have this fear about, okay, I couldn't go to the CEO and say, okay, I'm not doing this stuff as well as I know. We need that. This is gonna cost that. And HR, I'm speaking about in Spain.
No, listen, I get it. What you're saying is you're talking to somebody that you want to champion what you're doing in the business. At the same time, they recognize that your software is going to undermine their perceived value. Right. You then have to change the narrative. If they're telling you that, you can't use the same approach. Honestly, you have to speak to more than one person in the company. Absolutely have to, if you want to get more impact. And every person you speak to, you have to speak to their perspective. So the HR person recognizes that this is how it's going to help you. This is how it's going to free up time. You have to work on how you can reply to those objections. But here's the thing, guys. Who's heard of objection handling? Yeah? Everyone's heard of objection handling. It's the worst thing in the world you can do. Do you know why? Because it's conflictory, it's adversarial. It's like you say something to me and I say, yeah, but I've got an answer for that. And you're a salesman. That's not who we are. What we do is we recognize the problem before it arises and we disarm it. So if I know, what's your name? I know Ash is going to say, yeah, but it's going to undervalue my perception as an HR leader. I'm going to say, and you know what the funny thing is? When we talk to our customers, the first thing they say is, how does it impact HR? Because it seems to undervalue what we do. And that's a great question, because what we say is this. So we disarm the problem before it comes up. Now, you have to be creative, guys. This is your job to work out how to reply to that. I can't tell you that in 45 minutes. But once you've spoken to HR, speak to someone else that the software package impacts upon. It's an operational software as well, right? Who's typically looking after operations? Operations. Do we speak to them as well? Hands up if you're speaking to more than one person in the company. Excellent. Hands up if you're speaking to more than 3 people in the company. I'm not saying it's always possible, but always seek to broaden your contact points, because here's what happens, right? If you're speaking to HR says, well, send me an email, send me the document, send me the quote, I'll pass it on. And then you've just I've lost it. And then you're reliant upon that person, and with greatest of respect to HR, they don't have the greatest amount of power in an organization. Yeah? So we need to find a route to communicate value. And if I can translate consequence, problem, pain to financial, then there's a reason for the finance director to speak to me. Then there's a potential reason for the owner to speak to me. There's a reason for operations to speak to me, because I'm going to speak to something that they are concerned about. If they're not concerned about HR per se, but they're concerned about how the application of your solution will take away a problem they have. So that means we need to know what problems they experience beyond HR. Please. Speak up, please.
Yeah, so when you have this situation, because I've had this situation a lot of times where I've had a conversation with somebody and I've asked and they actually realize the pain and they say, oh my God, I'm actually spending a lot of time on this, blah, blah, blah. They are super convinced and then they are, okay, so now I need to talk with my boss
Right.
Because he's the one who's gonna make the decision, right? And I know what's gonna happen because this person maybe doesn't know how to translate this problem to this person.
100%.
And I'm like, okay, yeah, what do you think about having a meeting? And they are kind of afraid because, so it's really difficult.
So what we do there, what we need to do there is change the narrative. When you speak to somebody and they say, yeah, do you know what, there's a reason for us to speak, great. The way that we work at Factorial is that we want to have the right conversation from the beginning. That means all the stakeholders need to be involved. And I understand this might not be the way you normally do things, but we see that this delivers the best results because it reveals to the people that are involved in this decision-making process the value immediately. And it will mean that you can start to realize the benefits sooner. So to that end, I'd like to have the next call and I'd like to invite XYZ person on that. And I think it's really important that they come on this call because otherwise they're going to be playing catch up. Because you're right, if you're relying on them to translate what you've said and then convey that to the business, well, firstly, how good are you at communicating? How clear are you? Even if you're brilliant, there's distortion. And then it's how persuasive they are, because I've seen it in my own organizations that I've worked with. Oh yeah, I've had this really great call with this salesperson about this thing, and the management's like, yeah, that's not urgent for us. They won't even give it airtime, and the person doesn't know how to present the problem in a compelling way. So we need to then start speaking to them simultaneously. So if you've made contact with HR and you've made contact with operations, and you say to the operations guy, hey, I've just had a conversation with HR, I'd like to have the same conversation with you because I'm pretty certain that what we're doing for companies like you is going to be very much of interest. You start doing it at the same time, please. Sorry?
Yeah, so from your point of view, do you think that the C-level really cares about the HR processes?
No.
Or do you think that
Not at all.
the last problem for them?
C-level are concerned with C-level responsibilities. If it's operations, how can I make the company work more efficiently so I reduce the operational expenditure? If it's financial, how can I make the company work better so that I reduce our operational cost? If it's a managing director or chief executive, what can I do to make everything work together more efficiently that we get more profit for the amount of energy that we expend? We change the conversation to suit the role that they have because that's what they're interested in. The moment I say, if you're chief executive and I say, I want to come and talk to you about HR software, he's like, talk to somebody else. I'm not interested. It's not part of my responsibility. But if I say to you, we've demonstrated to our clients a saving operational benefit of X, Y, Z, and this is where you need to be specific, and we believe that your profile is such that we could show those significant benefits to you. I'd like to talk to you about how we do that. We don't mention software. It's not the product that they're buying change. And they're from the current state to the future state. It's really important you let go of this idea that you're selling software. You're selling solutions. And the software is a vehicle to make that change in their operation. Guys, I know that English isn't your first language, so thanks for following me. Anything that I'm not clear on, please put your hand up. I will restate in a different way. It's important that you understand this. Yeah, so is everybody following okay, yeah? Hi.
Sometimes I get contacts from the operations management people. They reach out to Factorial because they're looking for the time-off solution.
Right.
And then I reach out to them and they're like, yeah, I really like the solution, we really need it, but you shouldn't talk to me. You have to talk to HR. So then when I call HR... So
they call you in and then they redirect you. That's fine. You still need to talk to them.
Yeah, but then when I call HR, they get very defensive. I approach them, I tell them, look, I'm reaching out to you because someone from your company...
Get them to sponsor you. Get your contact to sponsor you in that conversation. So your operations, your HR, you say, hey, Taryn, can you give us a call? I'd like to talk about how your offering might impact upon us. And I say, of course. And I get on the call and I don't talk about our software. I say, tell me about why you think there's a need to examine. Tell me why now. Tell me how it's impacting. And you're saying, yeah, but you need to speak to... No, I want to hear from your perspective. And once you've gone into that detail for me, and then you say, yeah, but you need to speak to HR, I say, of course. Why don't we three set up that call? Why don't you set that up for me? Because that way it will get more traction. Because typically, if I go and approach HR without that sponsorship, they might think, well, you know, this might be underpinning what we do or undermining what we do, when in fact what we're doing is making people's jobs a lot more efficient so that you can actually focus on other areas of the business, like building the mindset and the morale of the productivity and all the other great stuff that HR brings to the table. Yeah? Don't let them say, right, there you go and sort that out. No, we're in it together. You brought me in. I understand your pain. I can make significant changes. But keep going into the problem. Keep going into the problem. And then say, but by the way, I need to speak to HR. Your operation, how do you think this impacts sales? Do you think hey, do you mind introducing me on email? Because speaking to companies like you, that I do frequently, I know that it actually translates to a problem for them in these ways. And this is where you guys have to do some work. You have to try and work out how these problems translate to different parts of the departments in the company, yeah? Because then you leapfrog to the different people and you use your initial contact point to help you get there. Make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Cool.
So I have a question. We have to find the person who's the decision maker and who's suffering the pain.
Yeah, but the decision maker, don't worry about that at the moment.
Okay, so the person who has the biggest pain, right? Sometimes it's the HR manager. So my question is, if we go and talk to the CEO, isn't it possible that the HR person is angry that we go behind him?
Listen, if I am going to speak to the chief executive, and the chief executive tells the HR person to speak to me, then that's their mandate to do so. But what you want to try and avoid is them handing you off and letting go of the process. Yeah? The complexity of the situation or the complexity of the organization will determine how much or how little they will get involved. Yeah? But if you manage to get in front of the CEO and you can demonstrate that they have an operational challenge that is impacting their business financially today, and you can project that cost out for the rest of the year, and it's in the tens of thousands, why wouldn't they want to make sure that HR was on board with it? If they buy into it, HR, they're going to follow. They're going to do what they see as right for the company. But what you do, again, is you don't just rely on the CEO and HR. Always investigate how it impacts the wider business. Because to your first point, decision maker, you get buyers, you get users, you get decision makers, you get signatories. Yeah, people. You might go to the finance guy to sign the order. You might get one person that uses the software that I need to buy into it. Yeah, I'd make the decision that influences someone else's saying yes. It's a complex buying process. Remind me what the sweet spot of your company size is. How many employees? 20 to 1,000. That's the sweet spot. That's a big spectrum. Yeah, no, what's the sweet spot? What's the best fit? Okay. A reasonably sized organization, yeah? And you're going to have different siloed departments. They're probably going to communicate because these decisions don't get made in a vacuum. They probably get discussed in a meeting, a board meeting or a monthly meeting. And this is another way that we can expedite the deal, guys. Well, we can reduce the lag that we create as salespeople by knowing the sales process that we have to adhere to and making sure that we don't get ahead of ourselves and then have to keep coming back. So map out the sales process. I said this last week for the new guys here. Understand the number of touch points that you go through with an organization to get to the point where you can proceed. Because what we don't really want to do is get to the end of the sales cycle and then you say, so, do you want to buy it? What we want to do is create that process where they see it's the most obvious outcome of the exchange, because their current situation is spending more money than they will do if they change. Is this making sense? Yeah? Now, if you think that any of this is easy to say and you want more examples, put your hands up now. This is your opportunity to ask questions.
Yeah, so basically, we have customers, some of them come from inbound, that they already know the problem or they want to solve something, and other customers, they still don't know too much about the problem. It's like outbound, we call them, it sounds interesting, we are in a meeting. So my point here is, how long would you spend with someone that at the moment is just to check what's going on in the market, how can you do for them? Because sometimes it's like, I think, okay, I can spend maybe 45 minutes, 1
Sure.
hour talking to this person, but this person already told me that it's not in the short term. So basically, what's going to happen after this meeting is, okay, yes, something interesting, I need to check, maybe I will talk to the CEO, then you can put a follow-up call or whatever, send some information, but that person tells you, okay, now I'm really busy, so we need to talk maybe next month. Next month is everything a bit.
Yeah, and it just goes on and goes on and goes on. Ask the question, you contacted us. Is this a problem that you feel needs addressing at the moment? What's your sense of urgency? Ask that question. What's your sense of urgency about it? And if they say, we're just out in the market looking, okay, do your qualification, ask questions, see if you can uncover greater problems. But ultimately, if they're just out in the market kicking tires, which is an expression to say, not serious about buying, I just want to see what's on offer, you can bookmark that into the future for a future call. But depending on their level of organizational seniority, if that's just someone at the sort of lower end of the organization, ask the question, have you been asked to do this? If so, by whom? What else is happening in the organization? Do you have any change on the horizon that might impact this situation, making it more urgent in the future? What's short term for you, Mr. Customer? 3 to 6 months? 1 month? Because if someone says, oh, I've got to do something in the next 60 days, 30 days, it's probably a bit late for you guys. And the honesty is, it sounds like brilliant, it's the right time. But if they've come to you in an inbound way saying they need a quote and they need to make a decision in the next 30 days, you're probably there to make up the numbers. Yeah, that's typically what happens. When companies have the policy of getting 3 competitive quotes, you get the guys that you want to work with, and then, right, I need to go and find a couple of extra quotes, we're making a decision next month, and they say, oh, they'll build it up to you, and you be mindful, but you judge this for yourself, but if it's that short a term, there's a good chance that they've already spoken to other people. So you ask that question, who else have you been speaking to? What are your other options on the table? But if it's 2-3 months into the future, that's probably the right time scale. Yeah? So qualify their interest to fix the problem. Is it urgent for you? If so, who's decided for you to go and investigate? Yeah? Find out if there's senior level sponsorship for this. Hey.
I have another question, but more for the discovery. Like when they are really not aware of the problem, and you don't want to tell them oh, you're stupid, you're still doing it with Excel. How do you find a good way of not making them feel offended by showing them that this has a negative outcome?
You ask them about the consequences of that approach. What do you think would be easier about what you do if you didn't have to rely on manually entering information into Excel? How much time do you spend a month doing that kind of function? Or what do you think that adds as a burden to the organization?
That is working.
But listen, I got a flat tire in my car, I can still drive it, it's working, but is it good? No?
But this is offending, no?
No. If you listen, we're not trying to make anybody feel stupid, yeah? But if you're saying, what could you be like if you didn't have this constraint? We're asking them to think about the future state. What is it you dislike about Excel? Excel, great, it's free. License cost, but it's free. What doesn't it do as well as you think it should do? And you've got to come to the realization, guys, that sometimes they're just not the right fit for you. Not everybody is going to be a customer. Not everybody is going to get the benefit today. But here's the thing. If you act with integrity and you conduct yourself as sales professionals well, you may well just plant a seed in their mind that even 6 months into the future or a different company, they'll go, that person, yeah, they didn't try and sell me anything. I'll give them a call. You're planting seeds, yeah? And so true. I know it sounds cliche, but it does happen that way. I've got personal experiences of that happening. So always act in the best interest of the customer, not try to sell them anything. But ask questions. What would it be like if you didn't deal with that constraint? How does that impact your day? Talk to me through it on a situational basis. How does that actually work? The more you talk about situation and operation in their day-to-day, so what does that day look like for you? What does that week look like for you? What's the biggest thief of your time in context to sort of managing the HR process the way you currently do? And what would you do if you didn't have to do it that way? Where would you like to focus more time or focus more effort or resource or whatever is important to that person? Just get them thinking about it. And when they answer it, don't just accept the answer and say, that's really interesting. Hey, that's really cool, but can you expand upon that a little bit more? And how do you think that might impact other parts of the business? We're really trying to peel back that onion to get to the heart of the matter. And once you've got that, it's like, well, it sounds to me like it's a really good reason for us to take this to the next step, which is simply just to have another conversation, show you a little bit more how this has helped other people in a demonstration. But I think the most effective way for that to help, and the way it's helped us the most in the past, is to get some of the other people involved. I'd like to introduce myself to them, and it'd be really helpful if you could just broker that introduction. Because if you believe that there's a value here, it will be more effective if we work together. And by the way, ask what's their personal win. You know, what does it make? How does this problem affect you personally in your role? Not just the company, but how does it affect you personally? Because if you're stressed out about using inadequate software approaches or clunky systems, you might find that, you know, you go home and you're stressed at night. That's not what it's about. Questions?
Competition. What will be your strategy when you're in front of a lot of competition to make a difference?
Okay, so quite often there are components in the competitor software that you don't have, right? Problem. Are those components important? If they are, you might not be the best fit. And again, don't try and sell something to someone if it isn't the best fit. What is it about the other offerings that you particularly like? So the question goes like this. Hey, so you're in the market for this new platform, or you've been thinking about this for some time? Excellent. What else have you looked at? Oh yeah, they're really good. We come across them a lot. No problem with that. Never denigrate the competition. It's just bad taste. What did you like about that? Yeah, really? And that's important to you, is it? Well, I like it, but is it important? They're two different things. What would you say are the key important aspects that need to be present in any solution that you take? And, oh, you're in contract. Okay. How's that working out for you? What's the customer support like? Do you think that you're getting great value? Do you think it has the functionality you're looking for? By the way, when's that contract come up? Another year, okay. Put it in the diary. I'll get in touch 6 months beforehand. The lead time to buying is never in a couple of months. It's not, if it's a big company, they have to go through evaluation. You want to get in early. So to answer your question again, competition, you always focus on what they like, what they don't like, what they think is essential. You know, liking and needing are two different things. I'd like a Ferrari, but I only need a car. Yeah? So it's just being specific and getting them to explain more with clarity. Because if we take their first response, we miss the gold of it. Excuse me.
Would you, sorry,
Go for it.
Would you give up at that point though, or would you just like, you know,
in this situation where the competitor, they're saying that,
They like the features of the competitor. And
again, like or need, what is it you need to have present in the platform? That's what we're talking about, the gap between what they want and what they need.
if their need is all in the competition, like what point do you say, okay, this isn't for you? Like, do you then ask about the contract that they're going to take with them and establish when you're going to nurture them in the future?
If you're talking to somebody who's simply looking at features and benefits of a platform and they're ignoring all the other dimensions of the offering, price, customer service, functionality, of how easy to use, whatever it is on the different planes at which you're offering, once you've exhausted those and you said, right, they're not important and I'm just looking at this, and they are significantly high enough in the organization that says, well, it's hard to my decision apart of the rest of the team, but this is where we're going. And the chances are you're late to the party and they've bought into someone else's idea, right? When to do that, you've got to decide based on your qualification, yeah? And qualifying doesn't mean decision maker, time frame and budget like it used to do. I mean, they're important dimensions of a sale, but if you trust what the person says, you'll probably walk away from 90% of the deals without really understanding how you can impact them. So look at all the different dimensions that you might compare your offering with somebody else's. So there is functionality, the features that it has. There's deployability. How quickly can we put it into your business and get it working for everybody's benefit? Because one of the features of what you do is that it becomes a tool for everybody, not just HR. Yeah, we're talking about value for money. It will pay for itself. In the productivity increases. And do you actually use that as an approach to talk about the increases in productivity and the value that generates as a means for paying for itself? If you could increase productivity by like 1 or 2% across the company, it'd probably be greater than the cost of the software. So look at all the ways in which you can differentiate or at least compare how you fit the offering to your competitors. Again, always be polite and respectful of them because you don't want people slagging you off either. It's just not cool. But it's fine to say you like it, but how important is it to you? Qualify. Get people to explain what they mean, but you don't do it as a Spanish Inquisition. It's like, how important is that to you, that functionality? How does that impact upon the business? Because you may find in doing that, they go, well, you know what, it actually is not that important. It's just they really described it well when they showed it to us. It's true, because if we're good at what we do and when we demonstrate the software, we can enhance certain dimensions of what we have to be a leading part of the offering. The engine in the car, whatever it is. ¿Qué más? No more questions? Sorry, fella, I'm a little bit deaf. It's not you, it's me. There's too much loud music in my youth.
Okay, yeah, related to the question I asked before about the inbound, outbound, and someone that comes to look for something that maybe that person still don't know that he needed. Maybe in the first 20 to 30 minutes of the meeting, you can know already 80% of information, if they are gonna buy or not buy, or think about it in the short term. But imagine someone that you know that is not gonna do anything for the first 6 months, but if you talk for another 30 minutes, maybe you have a little bit more probability that he or she get more aware of the problem, but still it's difficult. What would you do? Like, keep it short?
I don't think making someone speak for an hour is a justification, because if I haven't managed to convey or reveal in the first 30 minutes, another 30 minutes invested in that call isn't going to make any difference. Yeah? When we're talking to people, we're trying to determine how keenly they feel the problem. And if you're talking if you're questioning in that first 10 minutes and they're speaking for 20, they should realize very quickly that there is a reason to have a subsequent conversation. I really caution you on making a decision that I can tell 80% of the time that they're going to buy on the first call. That's a terrible thing because you're projecting what you think to be true. That's Dunning-Kruger. I know more than I actually do because you don't know what's going on in their mind. And what happens, we have confirmation bias. I think you're not going to buy, so I'm going to look for reasons to determine and validate that hypothesis. That's what we do subconsciously. But equally, if we think that they're going to buy, then we're going to keep pushing and looking for it. Try to be present and allow them to unfurl that information. It's very risky to start trying to predict whether people are going to buy or not in that first call because we will subconsciously look to validate that hypothesis. Fella?
What we can do when the people we're talking with, they are emailing our questions about their processes. For example, I'm with a prospect in the meeting, and I'm talking like, hey, tell me, what is your pain in your vacation process that you really like to solve? And they say like, we don't. And they're just passing and passing and passing because they think they don't trust in me.
They don't trust you yet because you walk up to a complete stranger, it's like, hey buddy, how you doing? Why don't you tell me about your financial situation? What's your bank account like? Who are you? It's like, we have to establish authority and credibility, yeah, and we do that being human and with humility, but we do it also by demonstrating knowledge about companies like them. So you know what, life's difficult at the moment, and financially it's a bit of a challenge for people. I work with a lot of people like you. This guy here, he was telling me that the end of the month is when it's really difficult for. You start to relay what might be a situation they might be encountering about someone you've already worked with. Is that something that might have been on your experience? Is that something that you might have seen in the organization? If you know the kinds of problems that are likely to come up, and then you speak about those in context of somebody else, I'm not asking you, I'm asking, is that something that you might have experienced? Because now I'm saying, I know about your business, I know about the environment and how it works, I do this day in, day out. Is that something, and then the person's saying, okay, so they do know a little bit about my business, they do understand me, I am prepared to open up a little bit more. The more you demonstrate your credibility, your knowledge about the problems that they have as an organization, because they're commonplace in companies like them, the more they're going to trust you. But if you go straight in with, tell me, they're not going to give you anything.
Yeah, okay, but now think that it's not in a meeting that it's supposed to have some interaction between the client and me because they are there in the meeting. Now, let's translate this to the call, to the first call, the discovery call. How the reps can really build this kind of trust with the people they are talking with when the majority of the time they are like, hey, I don't have time for you, I don't really want to go a cold call.
Right, so the very, very first cold call, 2 minutes. No more than 2 minutes. The first call is to sell the meeting. The first call is not to get someone talking on the phone, because you don't know what they're in the middle of, and they haven't given you their attention, you haven't got their permission to speak to them. But you can say, hey, look, I know you're busy, so am I. I've actually been trying to get hold of you for a few weeks. I'd really like to speak to you because we work with companies just like you and people in your role, and we have a really interesting way of increasing or improving or bettering I don't want to talk to you now. As I said, I've got to get onto another call. I've been trying to get hold of you for a week. Can we put 20 minutes in the end of the week to have this conversation? I think you'll find it really valuable. I'm asking permission. In the next call, hey, and I don't start with tell me, because that's not valuable to this person. We have to give value. Appreciate your time. I'm going to be concise because, again, I know that you're a busy person. We work with a number of companies like you. We help impact the way that the operation works, making it more accessible from a user perspective across the whole organization, reducing the burden on functionality of HR and other departments, Yeah? We are so good at what we do, we have seen in our customers an improvement in their operational capacity that's translated to value of X thousands of euros a year. I haven't mentioned software yet. I'd be interested to know about a couple of the dimensions of your business. Yeah? We work with HR and operations software platforming, but what I'm really interested in talking to you about today is how or whether or not you have these same problems that we see in other companies like X, Y, and Z. Does that happen in your organization? Yeah, there we do. Can you tell me a little bit more how that works, how that impacts you, and how does that impact somebody else, and get the conversation that way? Does that make sense? But you're happy with that, though? Are you happy with that answer? Yeah, for sure. Okay. Yeah, cool.
Guys, we have 5
time?
more minutes.
Okay.
And then just one quick reminder, next Friday is the last training that we have with Taran for SDRs, but of course, because he's such a great coach, we will continue working with Taran, but we will focus on account executives. Obviously, it will be open for everybody in the sales team, because if you want to become an account executive someday, you need to learn, right? So when we finish, if all the account executives can stay at least for 10 minutes and just deliver all your problems to Taran, but do not expect an answer today, okay? We need information to create the next trainings. So just 10 minutes, tell him everything that you suffer every day, okay? Only account executives, please.
Just about work suffering, though. I don't know your dietary troubles. Guys, listen, there is a lot of what I do online, and they're not lengthy, boring videos. They're 30 seconds to a couple of minutes. Connect with me on LinkedIn if you haven't done so. Follow some of my content. It's a good reminder. If you're on Clubhouse, follow me. I do a lot of workshops on there for free, and it's an opportunity to ask me anything. And they're often about cold calling or creating urgency, all these subjects. So if you're on they're in the evening as well, so not during the day. So final questions. You make it count, because this is your opportunity to ask. What's the biggest problem we've got to cover? Sorry? Can you please mention again the platform? Clubhouse. Yeah, it's a spoken platform. And if anybody, it's an invitation only. If anyone wants an invite, I have some, so message me up on LinkedIn. Ya está?
Any other questions? Okay.
One more? 2 more? Come on, that's good.
Do you have any particular response when a gatekeeper literally gives you something we asked about, are you using software and they say, oh, I'm not really good at it?
Yeah, the gatekeeper being who specifically? The receptionist. You don't want to be talking to the receptionist about software. That's like red rag. So. Do they have a sales team in this company? Do they have a sales team? Do they have a sales department? Probably. Most companies are selling stuff. You know? Phone the salesperson up. Hey, professional courtesy. I'm trying to get hold of your boss. I'm trying to get hold of such and such. We do this. We know how tough the gig is. Can you give me their direct dial? I promise I won't tell you it was you. I've used that so many times. Yeah, but it works. If you can nuance a decent pitch to the salesperson, they are going to go, you know what, fair enough. If you make a ham-fisted, they're just going to be like, we used to call them turkeys. It's a bad expression. We had a turkey on the phone. No, not helping. But when someone was really good and they phoned my sales team, and they would, because they want to get through to me or get through to one of my colleagues, my team would give them that if they could pitch them well. And you're pitching the salesperson for my number. That's the pitch. Yeah, and then you get the number, and then you phone me, and then you pitch me. So go round the gatekeeper. Salespeople, who are the people likely to pick up the phones the fastest in any company? The hotline, the sales hotline. Go. Hello, Factorial. So use that to your advantage. Cool? There was one more question, I think, at the back. Sorry.
So basically, for someone that you speak, that they know the problem, they back, and they want to do something, but it's typical that they are on rush, they are all day running, busy, they want to try, and it's something that
You have to set expectation at the beginning. Okay, so this is how Factorial really works best with our clients. What I'd like to do is share with you how this could work, and if you're okay with that, we'll proceed on that basis. We start off with a simple call after this one for 20 minutes, half an hour. We ask some more questions and we sort of get to understand more about how this is impacting your business. If at the end of that it really works for you, then we're going to show you our platform, because that's really important for you to understand it. If that works, we would then like to broaden that conversation to the key people it affects in the business, such as XYZ. If we can do that, the chances are that we can deliver the value to your business. What we found is if that doesn't happen, it kind of staggers. So the question is this something you'd like to see happen? If the results are what we believe they can be, is this something you feel urgent about solving? And if so, this is how it would unfold. So you state at the beginning how it's going to go and you get their buy-in to that. Rather than at the end of the call, then try and keep pushing, you're pushing water uphill rather than saying, this is how it's going to be. Get their buy-in to that. Yep, that's a logical process. If there's value at every stage, we agree that we'll move on. And we'll agree it will move on in a timely fashion. Oh, you have a quarterly meeting for the board to decide on new purchases. Okay, great. When is that coming up? We'll work around that. So we have to ask questions about their internal buying processes as well. Yeah? When you understand that they're not going to meet for another 2 months to talk about purchasing, there is no point trying to push or incentivize the person on the phone because they can't do anything. Yeah? All right, guys, look. Connect, ask questions. I hope you found this useful. I don't say interesting, I want useful, because I want you to apply what I've actually spoken about today. Yeah? If any of it feels that it's nice to hear but you don't know how to apply, get in touch. I'll talk through it again. I'll give you 10 minutes of my time, 15 minutes of your time. I am truly passionate about solving problems for my clients. You guys are my clients. Yeah? I don't just say that. I've been doing this job for a long time. It works. You have to practice it. If you try it once and it doesn't feel right or feels awkward, you have to keep practicing. Yeah? Excellent.
Thank you so much.